I'm Tyler Austin from Gung Strategic. Thank you so much for watching. In this video, I'm going to talk about the basic principles of clearing dead space. Now, a few months back, I did a video on defining dead space and the different types of dead space. If you haven't watched that, I highly suggest you go watch that first, then come back to this video, because I'm going to be using terminology from that video. I'm not going to reiterate it here. Anyways, the principles of clearing different types of dead space remain the same no matter where or what creates the dead space. Whether that dead space lies within a room, in a hallway, created by furniture, whatever, the principles of clearing the different types of dead space generally remain the same. Now, for the simplicity of my examples are going to be of a two-man element who just made entry into the room. They made a basic conventional limited penetration entry into the room. They performed their secondary scan, and they're going to work whatever dead space lies within the room. Now, in particular for deliberate clearances, there are ways we can manipulate entries to better attack follow-on dead space within the room. But again, for simplicity's sake, for my examples, there's going to be a two-man element who used a basic conventional limited penetration entry, and they're going to work dead space from their positioning. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and jump into our first example. So for our first example, two-man element made entry into this room. Again, basic limited penetration entry. They did their secondary scan, and here they have anchored dead space. Now, in this example, right, he has the best angle on this dead space. There's nothing that left, just so we're clear, for simplicity in referring to these two guys, I'm just going to use right and left, i.e. right for the right-hand guy, left for the left-hand guy, just so we're clear. So right has the best angle on this dead space. There's nothing that left can see that right can't. So right has the angle on this dead space, therefore he owns it. He owns this angle and he owns this dead space. He's going to be the one to work the dead space. Left, because he does not have the best angle on the dead space and there's nothing else for him to hold on, he's just going to go ahead and check his muzzle either down or up, depending on his personal preference, and he's going to be in a supportive role. So right, he's going to be the working man, he's going to be the one to work the dead space, and left is going to be in a supportive role. He's going to be the support man. Another very common terminology that you're going to hear regarding this is going to be angle man, corner bitch, or if you want to use more appropriate terminology, it's angle man, corner boy. Regardless, it's different terminology for the same exact thing. Right, because he has the best angle on the dead space, he's the angle man. Left, because he does not have the best angle on the dead space and there's nothing else for him to hold on, he's going to be the corner boy. Regardless, left is going to be in a supportive role for right as he works the dead space. So once left has checked his muzzle, either up or down, right is going to go ahead and begin to work the dead space. Now in this case, left, he's going to trail him, so he's going to stay more or less on line with him, and he's going to give right plenty of room to work and plenty of room to bail if he needs to bail, but at the same time, he's going to be close enough to be in a good position to support him in the event that right decides to utilize him. There's a bunch of things that right can use him for in terms of pinning angles or waving him into wingman. There's other things that left can do for right, who's the working man, but that's honestly another topic for another day. Regardless, left is going to be in a supportive role as right works. So right's just going to go ahead and finish clearing the dead space. Now, here's a very important point to be made here. Once right snaps that 90 degree, it is very, very important that he takes angles slightly past the 90 degrees. So once he snaps at 90, he's going to go ahead and take another step and clear past the 90. This is very important to make sure that this wall in this case actually terminates. If you just snap that 90 degree and you go, oh, it's clear, it's very possible that you missed something, whether that be a door on that wall, maybe there's a divot on that wall that's deep enough to hide somebody. It's very possible that that wall actually does not terminate, that there's some other space that needs to be cleared. So it's very, very important that once you hit that 90 degree, that you take an extra step and you clear angles past that 90 degree to ensure that that wall actually terminates. Now in the last example, the support man or the corner boy was trailing the working man or the angle man. Traditionally, in the angle man corner boy system, the corner boy would actually, after checking his muzzle, would actually pin himself to the wall and allow the angle man to go ahead and work the angle. And if he gets waved in or utilized in some other format, he'd go ahead and step up and do whatever he needs to do. Neither one is right or wrong. Both of them are equally as valid, depending on who you go to and what school you go to. They're going to teach it different ways. Personally, for me, I prefer trailing, but there are other schools and other people who are equally as valid who will tell you or who will teach to have the corner boy pin up against the wall. Either way is fine. Neither one's right or wrong, and honestly, a lot of it's going to be environmental. If it's a very narrow space, you may not have any other choice other than to pin yourself up against the wall, even if you prefer to trail. So a lot of it will be environmental, but either way, both of these are fine. There's pros and cons to both, and it's going to be dependent on who you're learning it from. Moving on to our next example, here we have unanchored dead space, meaning that if there's a threat, he can technically move 360 degrees around whatever object is creating the dead space. In this case, one side is going to hold security while the other side works and clears. This is very important because if both sides worked at the same time, once they got to the back and they hit the back at the same time, they could potentially shoot each other if there's somebody in the middle. It creates a very dangerous crossfire. So in this case, one side's going to hold and one side's going to work. This is going to be referred to commonly as a hold and work call. So for an example would be hold left, work right. Or you can simplify that simply by just saying work, i.e. work right or work left, because if you say, for example, work right, that naturally implies that left is going to hold. Now, in most cases, a team is going to have an SOP in terms of what side works, given no other factors that are going to alter that. And spoiler alert, almost always it's going to be, the SOP is going to be the right-hand side works, because most people are right-handed, therefore allowing the person on the right to work allows him to slice and work from his strong side. So in this example, the call is simply going to be hold left, work right, or simply just work right. And left is going to hold. It's okay for him to move along this wall to get a slightly deeper angle. And from there, he's just going to hold security on the left-hand side. Right, he's going to go ahead and begin to work the dead space. Now, once he breaks that 90 degree, he's going to go ahead and step further, again, to ensure that there's no continuation and that this actually terminates. Right, there could very well be a door there or whatever. He's ensuring that this terminates. So once right has cleared behind this dead space, at this point, this is clear, but now there has to be a decon, a deconfliction. So right, he's going to go ahead and shine white light and or visible laser, or of course, if you're under night vision, this would be IR laser illuminators. Regardless, white light and or visible laser on the ground, right, to decon with left, who is holding security. Left will reciprocate that by shining light and or visible laser on the ground, and they'll decon that way. I won't go into too much detail on that. That is its own separate video on topic. But regardless, there will be some form of decon to signify that this is clear. Also, right can also simply call clear as well. After that decon happens, a possible option is to call clear. Now, for our next example, here we have dead space in which we don't know whether or not it is anchored or unanchored. And when you don't know, you always assume and work it as if it is unanchored dead space. So it's going to be the same exact thing. There's going to be a hold and work call, or simply a work call. So it's going to be the same exact thing, work right. Left is going to hold security while right works. Now, right is going to go ahead and work the dead space. Now, once right identifies that this is in fact anchored dead space, what he's going to do is he's going to actually move and put himself in a position, in a supportive position to support left to work the other side of this dead space. By the fact of him moving and putting himself in a supportive position, this is body language that is telling left that this dead space is not clear and that it's anchored dead space and there's a continuation that still needs to be worked. So the fact that there was no decon and the fact that right repositioned himself to support left to work the other side of the dead space tells left that this continues. So at that point, left would go ahead and begin to work the dead space and clear the other side of the anchored dead space. For our next example, here we have a room in which we have opposing threats. So in this case, dead space on the left-hand side of the room, as well as a closed door on the right-hand side. Now, for this example, it's very critical that you understand priority of work. I did a video on this a little while back ago. If you haven't watched that, you should. But priority of work is going to be armed people, unarmed people, dead space and open doors, and finally, closed doors. Okay, so dead space is a higher priority over a closed door. Now, in this position from entry, they're going to be in cross coverage, so right is going to have the angle on the dead space, and left is holding security on the closed door. Now, because the dead space is of higher priority than the closed door, ideally, left is just going to go ahead and check his muzzle either down or up to give right a clear path to cross and attack the dead space. Once right crosses, left is going to go ahead and step forward, more or less get on line with right and retake security over the door. And in this case, left is going to go ahead and trail right as right clears the dead space to maintain security over the door, because he is responsible for covering left's back in the event that that door becomes an open door. Now, this could be handled another way, and it's not wrong, but in my opinion, what I just showed is best, but they could exchange this as well, meaning they could do a barrel exchange where left is holding on the door, right's holding on the dead space. They go up, they do a barrel exchange, and at that point, left is going to transition to the dead space, and right is going to transition to the security on the door. It's not necessarily wrong, and you will see that. However, in my opinion, the first way that I showed is better because it maintains known to known, and again, dead space is a higher priority over the closed door, and right already has the angle and the SA, situational awareness, over that dead space. So it's just more efficient and better to let him attack that dead space than to exchange it. But again, that latter isn't necessarily wrong, and you will see that it is an option, but in my opinion, the first way that I showed is just better. Now, if we take the same example, except that right-hand door is open, this changes things significantly. We still have opposing threats. However, now those opposing threats are equal, because dead space and open doors are equal, because open doors naturally lead to dead space. So now we have equal opposing threats. Again, right has the angle on the left-hand dead space in the room, and left has the angle on the open door. Now, there's different ways to do this, but they're going to stay in cross coverage. So one way is for them to work up their respective wall until it would be unsafe to go any further. At that point, they do a barrel exchange, and they would exchange threats. So right would take the door, then left would take up the dead space. Another way they could do this is actually exchange this at the doorway. So just after entry, they'll go ahead and do their wave off, and they'll go back to back, and right would take the door, left would take the dead space. They'll go back to back, which is actually technically wingmanning, and then they would clear the dead space and the open door in that type of formation. And then finally, for our last example, here we have two equal threats, so an open door and dead space, except now both of them lie on the same side of the room. So this is going to be an example of where that support man or that corner boy is going to be utilized. So in this case, right has the best angle over both of these threats, both the open door and the dead space. However, it would be extremely unsafe for him to try to clear both of these, because you can only effectively work one angle set at a time, and by putting himself out there and trying to clear both of them by himself, he'd be putting himself in overlapping angles of exposure. I've done videos on this. This would break the limited exposure principle. It'd be very unsafe for him to work both. So in this case, seeing this, right is going to go ahead and wave in his support man. So he's going to give up the door to his support man, right, or the corner boy, right? Support man, left in this case, he's going to step up and put himself in a position to slice out the door. And then Wright's going to put himself in a wingman position to maintain security over that dead space and eventually attack the dead space when he gets into a position to do so. So those are the basic principles and basic examples of working dead space. This is a very broad topic, and this video could be much longer, and I probably will make more videos on this topic in the future. But this should give you a pretty good understanding on how to work dead space. Now, like I said, I'll definitely be doing more videos on this in the future. However, if you'd like to, in the meantime, if you'd like to learn more about working dead space, there's a great course, online course that I recommend to everybody, and that is called The Basic 10. It's written by a guy named Brian from Change of Behavior. He's a very, very knowledgeable guy and someone you should definitely listen to. But either way, the online course is called The Basic 10, and I believe the website is called either the Tactical Society or the Tactics Society, something along those lines. I have it written somewhere above here. But again, it's called The Basic 10. If you just go on Google and you write in The Basic 10 CQB, it should pop up. But that's another really great written online course going over working dead space and follow-ons within rooms. So in the meantime, if you want to get more coursework on this, The Basic 10 by Brian from Change of Behavior, fantastic course. I highly recommend it. Anyways, I hope you found this video helpful and informative. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'm Tyler Austin from Unanchored Strategic. Thank you so much for watching.